This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. This video is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook. The weather might be cooling down, but your action on the field stays hot. And today I've partnered up with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official partner of the NFL, to get you close to the action right now. New customers bet just $5 and will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use my promo code WORSTTAKE and the crown is yours. If you've already signed up for DraftKings like me, you can get a no sweat bet, get a bonus bet back if your same game parlay / SGPX bet doesn't hit. Max reward limits apply. Fan of multiple teams and want to bet on all of them? Combine multiple bets together for a shot at an even bigger payout. If sports betting is not available in your state, not to worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Sports. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use promo code WORSTTAKE, bet $5 and will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code WORSTTAKE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. So I get this question a lot from people, and they ask me, why do you think that the national media, when it comes to sports talk, is so bad? And I know that, this is mainly Browns fans who watch this channel feel that way. I know that almost every fan base feels that way about how the media covers their team. And while this kind of gets thrown aside as just, oh, it's sour grapes, your team did something and you didn't like that the media weren't biased towards your team, and that would be the main excuse people use for why people feel this way, I don't think that that's legitimately why people feel this way. I felt this discomfort and dissatisfaction from a lot of things that would be considered national outlets or national media things when it comes to a team that I watch a lot or a team that I cover, how they're being covered, the things that are being missed in that coverage. And I think this goes back to a few things. One, I think it goes back to the destruction of local media and the harm that that's done to the national media without them really realizing it. I think it goes back to the fact that the national media runs on an old, unsustainable model, in that what they're asking these national media pundits to do is literally impossible. Now, let's start at the beginning of that opinion, because I feel like I just threw a lot at you guys. Why do I feel like this has a lot to do with the destruction of local media? And what do I mean with the destruction of local media? Well, if you haven't been paying attention, due to corporate consolidation, a lot of jobs that were in the local market have gone away, right? You can see this easiest with high school football, right? There used to be 6-7 high school football reporters per outlet. Now there's like maybe one. Some don't even cover it at all. There just is way less coverage. If you're a fan of a smaller college football team or an FCS school, you have seen this impact your college team. Part of the reason why you'll look in the 90s for a team like Youngstown State and see that they have like 20,000, 30,000 people, close to 30,000 people sometimes in their crowds, or you'll see these old like games of like the Rubber Bowl in Akron and everything else like that. And you'll see all of these people there is because back then there was more of a local media infrastructure, right? The local news was covered by a gang of local reporters. There were 3 people on the beat or multiple people, a lot of people on the local beat for Akron football. And then they relied on this Columbus people to get the stuff from Ohio State and everything else and some of the bigger stuff. And that's how things used to be done. Things used to be a lot more regional, but with the introduction of the internet and things kind of being more connected, things have gotten more nationalized and more consolidated. So instead of there being somebody or there being a team of people covering Akron football or Youngstown State football. And instead of those football teams being showcased on their local papers or on local television, instead of that, Akron and Youngstown's market gets sold to like Cleveland, and now all of that is now Cleveland, and there's no coverage of Youngstown State because they don't have a paper anymore. There's no Vindicator that exists. There's no coverage of Akron football because they'd rather put Brown stuff in Cleveland Brown stuff because, again, it goes back to corporate consolidation, right? There are just less people covering this stuff now. Now, how does that matter when it comes to the national media? Well, I'll get you there, right? So that is the current landscape. If you look at it, everything is consolidating. Newspapers are no longer like the Plain Dealer is not owned by the Plain Dealer. The Plain Dealer can be owned by like the Washington Post. Like there are like 5-6 different companies, if you're lucky, in a business sector that control everything and own everything. Instead of there being a bunch of different independent companies that are both operating on their own agenda, serving their own market. All of these companies are trying to serve one market, and that one market is the US, right? And if you're trying to push something to the market, all the smaller brands get pushed aside, even if they're a little profitable, because it's not as profitable as pushing Ohio State to everybody, right? Or pushing Alabama or Georgia or these brands that have national interest, instead of like, oh, we're going to push this small school or we're going to push high school football as well. These are the things, like, you just get kind of consolidated down to what are the big options. And the effect that that has on the national media means that there are less people who cover a team locally. Even in the NFL, there are less people who are responsible for only one team. And those people have less of a connection with the people who are national, because there used to be a chain of like, okay, local media, then it goes to like some of the people who cover more of the bigger stuff in the state. And then that information goes up and up and up and up the chain. But now there's no chain. They got rid of the chain. So if you're somebody who works for the national media and you want to talk about the Browns or the Bengals, you don't really have this rich infrastructure that you used to have of a bunch of different opinions from, credible people that are professionals that have done this for a while, to source what you get your information from. Now you have one or two people, right? You don't have a vast library of research to go, okay, if I want to know what's going on with the Browns, I can look here, I can see a bunch of different opinions. Like, you got a lot of blogs now, you got a lot of podcasts now, and that's what's filling the void, people like me, but you don't have a lot of actual infrastructure when it comes to this. And that means that you have less information from local markets getting up to the national media. And that really affects the coverage of every team, because now what people who work nationally are trying to do is they're trying to do a little bit of everything. Now, I'll tell you this right now. I cover the Cleveland Browns. I also cover the Cavs. I also kind of cover the rest of the AFC North because I do a podcast about the AFC North. I have no other time, okay? There's no more film I can break down. I am busy a lot of time. I work full days every day. It is a load. It is a lot to just do that section of it. I could not imagine trying to do all 32 NFL teams, all 30 basketball teams, and then maybe a spot sport on the side. There just isn't enough time in a day. And what that means is that not everybody is talking about games that they saw, because yes, you might have only had time. And let's be real, if you're working really, really hard in a 3-day period, well, in a 1-day period from Sunday to Monday, between the games happening and first take, between that time, if you're Stephen A. Smith or somebody who's going to be on that show, how much time do you actually have to watch any of these games you're going to be talking about? Like, realistically, like, even if you go back, watch the condensed version, let me tell you, you might be able to really get a good grip on like 6 games if you are not sleeping. because it's not just watching the game. You got to intensely watch it. You got to take notes and figure out what time did that happen and what was the flow of the game like. Like, it's in order to get an accurate read on a football team, it requires that amount of work. Like, I pride myself on having pretty accurate reads on where this team is and where this team isn't, because I have to put a lot of work in to make sure that I'm anywhere close. It's not just me doing my own work. It's me tapping in with other people who are doing a ton of work and seeing what they are seeing and seeing if that's what I think I'm seeing, and then matching it up and then talking to people who go to Berea every day and practice, and then trying to piece all of this together to get a good read on this team. And that's a full-time job, like more than a full-time job. I work a lot of hours to bring this up to you guys. And that's just one team, one game. That's it. It's one. Now imagine trying to do it with 7. Spoiler warning, they're not. There's no way you can. That's an impossible expectation. And that's what I mean by the model sucks. It is an old model and it's not sustainable, because since things are more connected, you are expected, if you are a national media broadcaster or a national media show, to talk about a lot of stuff, right? It's not just, hey, we're going to talk about the Cowboys. We're going to talk about the Lakers. We're going to talk about some of these other things. We'll show highlights, and that's it. Sports talk has evolved to the point where we have 3-hour, 4-hour shows all about just talking about the sports, right? And they all got to be different topics every segment. Like, this thing has evolved to a ridiculous point to where people do have to like talk about everything. And when you try to talk about everything, you end up talking about nothing, which means that somebody who very likely maybe did a cursory glance over a football game, right? The Vikings. You know, let's say you're talking about the Vikings. You don't watch the Vikings, right? You're not a Vikings fan. You don't know any Vikings. Like, you're just a dude who works in the national media. You got to talk about the Vikings. Okay, you're going to do a cursory glance at the box score. You're going to maybe, if you're real diligent, watch the highlights. You know, if you got some extra time, you'll watch the condensed game to get a better read on it. But more than likely, you're peeking at some highlights. You're looking at the box score, and you're in a rush, so you're going to circle 2 or 3 things in the box score and make the narrative about that. Or you're going to hear something that somebody else said earlier and then find a stat that you can add to it so you can piggyback on top of that take and then just go with that, because that's what that requires. Right now, sports takes are on an assembly line, is my point, right? Instead of this actually like coming from the local market, from the local team, with a lot of people with a lot of a good grasp on the team and a good read on the team, pushing out opinions, and that trickling its way up the chain to the national media when it's necessary. Now it's just, I looked at the box score. Nick Wright said that. I think that sounds good. Let me add this little seasoning on it so I'm not copying him. And that's what I'm going to say, because these takes aren't out there to be good. They're just out there to get attention and be content. And that's what I mean by, I'll call it the national media hot take assembly line. We have consolidated this thing. And I think a lot of the anger about it goes to like the people who are doing the jobs. Let me be very clear on this. You might not like Nick Wright. You might not like Stephen A. Smith or Colin Cowherd or Emmanuel Acho. Pick your talking head that you hate the most, whatever. You might not like that guy, but let me make this clear. If I were in this situation, I would become a product of that machine. So even somebody you like, and I assume if you're watching this channel like me, if I were put on that conveyor belt, guess what I'm making? What they want me to make, because that's the job, right? That is what you have to do. That's what it's designed to force you to do, is conveyor belt, spit out these takes, because it's just not possible to be that diligent about 32 football teams and 30 basketball teams and talk about them in that much detail. So that's what I mean by it's kind of the system itself, it's the motto itself, and it's outdated and it's not sustainable. And I do think it leads to a lot of unsatisfied people when they hear talk about their team. I don't think most people, and there are some people who just want the rah-rah cheerleader, good team stuff, but I think most people just want to have a good faith conversation about their football team. Like, that's honest to God what most people want. I think that's why I even get Bengal fans, Raven fans, Steeler fans even that watch this channel, despite the fact that I talk about the Browns most of the time on this channel, is because they feel like I'm going to have a good faith conversation about whatever's going on in the AFC North. And I try my best to live up to that. I like to say that being fair is not defending somebody. Being fair is literally the bare minimum that you could do. Like, it is the bare minimum you could do is to be fair. To a take, to a player, to anything, you got to be fair to them, right? You can't just be disingenuous and leave things out because you think it's going to make a hot take. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have, a bit or a hot take. I have plenty of them, but I make sure that mine stand up to the test before I roll them out there. But that means I could get less of these things out, which is a good thing in my opinion, right? Because I don't want to be on that conveyor belt. But that is the conveyor belt. And that is the problem, right? It's not Nick Wright or Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless that are the problem. They are the symptom of the problem. The bigger problem is that we've consolidated all this media. We have now like 30 people on TV, and we ask those 30 people to cover hundreds of thousands of hours of football and basketball. And it's impossible, flat out never going to happen, that when you do that, you're going to get accurate coverage on any of those teams. Now, if you're asking me what do I think would be a better model, it's not going to be what they're going to do, because what they're doing right now, they have to hire less people. It's for profit margins, right? You hire less people, you employ less people, you save more money, a CEO gets a fat bonus. And that's what this is all happening for. Me personally, I think that there should be, a healthier local market for these things. I think that they should invest in local markets. I think that when a healthy local market is there, it's good for everybody and it benefits everybody up the chain, from the consumer end, from the economic end, when it comes to the more jobs that you can have in there. The only people it doesn't benefit are the people who sit at the top of these chains, the CEOs. And this is why it's never going to change, because their bonuses are better. Their bonuses mean more to them than, people actually enjoying the product that they put out. So it's unfortunate that that's where we're at with it. But if you've ever sat back and wondered, why is the national media so bad at covering my Browns, right? Because I see this all the time. Whenever people talk about Deshaun Watson's contract or this and that about the Browns, they get so much wrong. And it's not, I think they hate the Browns. It's like they just don't even know what they're talking about most of the time. And then I have to bring them on this channel and talk about all the corrections and bring other experts in. And it's just obvious to me that there's not enough of them to do the amount of work that they are being asked to do. Like, they're being asked to have a hot take about almost 16 games every Sunday. How are you going to do that? It's impossible. That's just flat out silly, right? But that's what people are legitimately asking them to do. That's what their job legitimately is. And it's no surprise to me that it's gotten as bad as it's gotten, because, right now the system's as greedy as it's ever been. We don't have very much local media. If you live in a major city, you might have a newspaper still. Like, if you live in Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, you might still have a newspaper, but it's a crapshoot if you live in an area like Youngstown or Dayton or, Toledo, or if you have your local infrastructure and a healthy local market to put your team on television every week and everything else like that, and to talk about the things that people in that region care about when it comes to sports talk. And not having that there really does affect coverage all the way up the chain. It affects people's opportunities. It affects people's ability to make a living. It leads to like two people working for a whole market, which means more people are overworked. and not getting compensated for that overwork. And that's why I think where the national media is at right now is at such a terrible place, and why it's even starting to come off to you, the viewer at home, because now the content's bad. And the reason the content's bad is because they've literally gutted the whole machine down to the studs. And they're like, all right, all it can spew out is garbage, but you gonna like it because it's all you have. Now, and on the other hand, I should probably be fortunate, because if they weren't spewing out trash as much as they are nationally, I probably wouldn't have the space in the market to make my name and make my living. But I do think that this is where things are going, where you're going to have more established names, more established things in local markets, because that's going to be where people want to go. And then hopefully that can start to trickle its way on up and everybody. And hopefully it doesn't get as consolidated as it's gotten with television, right, on the internet. But I don't have very much faith in that. But that's where we're at. And I think that's why you're noticing that local coverage of your team, no matter what team you cheer for. Pittsburgh fans feel it. Baltimore fans feel it. Bengals fans feel it. Browns fans feel it. We just feel like the media, the national media, just always gets small things wrong about our team, especially when our team isn't one of the 4 or 5 hottest teams in the league. Like when LeBron was on the Cavs, getting accurate coverage about the Cavaliers was not difficult because everybody was watching the Cavaliers play basketball. But the second LeBron left, getting accurate coverage on our team was just like, whoa, what's going on? Like, it's like nobody's watching. And the fact is, nobody's watching. Right? Nobody nationally is watching. The same thing happens with the Browns. The Browns are 6-3. They probably should be talked about more, or they should be talked about accurately. But whenever the Browns are available to be talked about and they beat a team like the Ravens, they default to talking about the Ravens because that's the team that they've been watching more. They just haven't been watching the Browns, so they don't really have much to say. So they just avoid talking about the Browns in general, or when they do, they say random shit. You can see this trickling up when it comes to play-by-play, media coverage, everything, that it's just not that good anymore. And the fact is because these companies have cut out all of the infrastructure that helped people do these jobs, and now are asking, however many national employees to do the job of what used to be teams on top of teams on top of teams of people. It's corporate consolidation. It's ruining sports talk, to be honest with you. That's my opinion. The consolidation of it all, the ruthless gutting of everything, the lack of local media, and then that leading into a lack of local infrastructure for the national media to rely on has really made coverage bad. And since you don't have that interconnectivity anymore of national and local, since you don't have that reliability, and there are things that's better about now than in the past. I'm not trying to go back to say, hey, we should go back to cable in the 1980s and that's better. No, like there are things about the internet that are better. I just think greed ruins all of it, because then people want to save a buck here and save a buck there and not hire the proper amount of people to do a job. And it becomes that. Like, I think we've seen this same phenomenon. Like, if you've ever noticed your local Wendy's or McDonald's, like the service has gotten worse. And the reason your service has gotten worse is because of greed. And the reason it's because of greed is because instead of there being 8 people working in that McDonald's, there are now 4 people working in that McDonald's. So the people up top can save on 4 salaries. And the result is you get cold fries, you get overworked employees. Those overworked employees now have attitude because they're overworked. They take it out on you. You take out your frustration on them, and you get garbage service.